Part 11. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 101. Chapter 101 Popularity. Traceability. But I am a clinician T. Do you have evidence? Huh, what evidence can you have? The high priest huffed and puffed in anger, like a pressure cooker that was boiling water without closing the valve. Gretel remained calm and held out his hand. Please. You need evidence, right? Gretel led the way, and a group of people behind him followed him into the back hall. Evidence. He has been ready for a long time. High Priest Horner's steps were quick, as if he wanted to catch Gretel and kill him immediately without seeing the evidence. Elder Irwin followed slowly, looking determined. The bald bishop looked ahead and then at Elder Irwin, looking anxious and scratching his head. Hey, what did your apprentice come up with again? Didn't he just finish messing with the rabbit? Elder Irwin gave him an inscrutable smile. The apse of the Glory Cathedral is at the deepest part of the church, bypassing the altar and the statue of the Lord of Glory, and there is a semicircular hall behind it. 3 years ago, this was the rest room before the main ceremony of the church, and it was also the place where high-ranking priests gathered. The walls were decorated with splendid gold, and the thick and soft carpet was like a pit when you step on it. At this moment, the room was filled with documents, piles upon piles, at least hundreds of them. On the long table in the center is a map of Big Boss, with various small paper flags placed all over the map. When Greet and the others came in, there were several priests running back and forth holding documents. 318 beds of medical records. Received. I got sick 2 days ago. I live in Nangxiao Street, near Uncle George's Bakery on Donghung Street. 319 beds of medical records. Received. I got sick yesterday. My husband had diarrhea 3 days ago and was cured the next day. We live on Kelvin Street, near Freena's tailor shop. The priests all had blue faces and pale lips, and their feet were shaking. They finally finished today's treatment and thought they could rest, but Greet immediately gave him a new job, asking for medical history. Write a medical record. Compare it with the accounts of the patient's family members. Sort out the disease situation. Oh, the format used for writing medical records was copied to them temporarily by Greet, one copy for the entrance to the apse, one for severe patients and one for mild patients, and one for each area. Stick it on the big wooden shelf and copy it yourself. If something is missing, it has to be returned and rewritten. Gretel glanced at their embarrassed appearance and gloated. Asking questions about medical history and writing medical records. Which medical student doesn't want to pass this test? Since you have learned anatomy from me and used my methods to improve the effectiveness of treatment, then let me be your junior doctor. Hey. Cool. With the wind blowing under their feet, the priests announced numbers one by one, and flags were placed on the map one by one. The bald bishop leaned over to take a look, and Gretel immediately followed him and gave him instructions. The red ones are those who got sick today, the yellow ones are yesterday, the blue ones are the day before yesterday, black. The black ones are 7 days ago. The earliest sick person found so far was 7 days ago. Obviously, the black flags on the map are the sparsest. However, High Priest Horner stood next to the map, looking at the scattered black flags, his face gloomy, and he just wanted to curse. 1 or 2 flags are not yet apparent. Hundreds of flags are placed together. Anyone familiar with Heartland City can see at a glance. Those black flags formed a half circle with the spring goddess temple as the center. Then, the 6th day, the 5th day, the 4th day, one by one, they spread out. To make matters worse, the first servant in the temple to become sick fell ill 8 days ago. In front of the 2 sect leaders, these black flags, one by one, slapped him in the face. Damn the little guy. How did he come up with this idea? If you don't plant a flag, just flip through the records page by page, and don't even ask the patient, who knows who the first patient is. Gretel looked at the high priest's face, lowered his head, and rolled his eyes secretly. Is it easy for me to make a flow tune? Is it easy to investigate the source of infection and patient zero? Woohoo, there was a case in the previous life, and there was an entire CDC and dozens of people surrounding him, and the trajectory was clearly announced within 24 hours. Now, I can summarize the opinions of more than 300 people by myself. I am a clinician. I am not the CDC. Not from the Health Commission. Those who study health management and join the National Health Commission are not even qualified to take the exam as a practicing physician. If High Priest Horner heard Gretel's inner voice, he would definitely want to kill him on the spot. It's a pity that he is a priest, not a mage, and he has never learned the magic of detecting thoughts. Therefore, all that was running through his mind was the current crisis. The plague started from the fountain. This kind of thing must not be admitted. If people knew that the temple of the spring goddess, which nourishes the whole city with clean water, was the source of this plague, the goddess's faith would be severely hit. High Priest Horner thought about it and his face darkened. Nonsense. These words are all spoken by the patients themselves. How can they count? Those ignorant people, what they say can also be used to testify against the temple. Are you trying to blaspheme the goddess by repeatedly accusing her? Horner, Elder Irwin took 2 steps forward and pulled his disciple behind him. Gretel didn't appreciate it, and took a step behind him, revealing half of him. Your Majesty the Great Priest, I have no intention of questioning the temple, let alone blaspheming the goddess. All I have done is to find the source of the plague and stop this disaster as soon as possible. I believe that the goddess is compassionate and has mercy on the world, and I hope that her people will not infested with disease. What a clever word, the great priest snorted coldly. Gretel turned and pointed at the map. The patient's statement can indeed only be used as a preliminary reference and cannot be used to prove the temple. But you have seen the results of the rabbit experiment, and you have also seen the process of patient spread. What do you think about the fountain at the entrance of the temple? It's better not to let people come to get water for the time being. High Priest Horner's eyes were heavy. If he wants to be reasonable, the 2 pieces of evidence must be placed in front of him openly. If he is not reasonable, the natural God Church and the temple of the God of War are the backstage of this kid. He took a deep breath and flicked his sleeves. You said before that you had no intention of questioning the temple. Indeed. Okay. Then prove to me that the source of this plague has nothing to do with the temple. What? And the temple? Now there are a lot of clues pointing to the temple of the goddess of spring. You are making things difficult for me by insisting that I give false evidence. Don't worry, as long as it is proven that the plague came from the temple, I will definitely provide ironclad evidence. Gretel's face suddenly became serious. He bowed slightly and answered firmly. What I seek has always been the truth, and only the truth. Since you are concerned about the source of the plague, don't worry, I will definitely provide irrefutable evidence. Protagonist, I am a clinical major. Why should I do work at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention? T. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 102. The high priest was furious and walked away. Gretel was not affected. He should eat, sleep, and work 3 times a day. He ordered the priests to do rounds, write medical records, and compile data. From morning to night, he only uses his words to tell others to work, without even using any healing skills himself. Superior doctors have the privileges and responsibilities of superior doctors. For example, after the ward round in the evening, Joanna could stand in front of him, with 3 red marks on her cheeks flying, and ask directly, The number of patients is increasing. When will the number of patients decrease? When will this plague end? Greet secretly wiped a cold sweat. He really couldn't answer the question of traveling back in time a year ago. Although he could read epidemiology in his memory at any time, it was still a bit difficult to immediately apply the formula to calculate the data. However, thanks to the disaster last year, it is still easy for him to tell you a method when the turning point of the epidemic will come and when it will end. When it will be reduced depends on whether we can cut off the spread of the epidemic. As long as all patients are admitted to the cathedral and there are no more new cases outside, in another 7 days, or at most 7 days, this plague will be completely over. Then how to cut it off? Let everyone drink boiled water. Clean all water sources. And find the source of the spread of the plague. I will do this. Seizing this excuse, Greet got rid of the treatment work openly. As soon as the data was compiled, he turned around and walked out of the back hall, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Gretel? Where is Gretel? People who came to him had to ask all the way. I asked from the hall to the side hall, from the side hall to the back hall, and then from the back hall to the second floor. It was not easy to find Greet's exact location. When I opened the door and walked in, I was immediately overwhelmed by the smell in the room. The visitor covered his nose and stood trembling at the door, wanting to run away. There was a strange smell in the room, and the fragrant broth was mixed with an unpleasant stench. I don't know how long they have been brewing, they are entangled with each other, regardless of each other. The visitor's IQ was lost too soon, and he struggled at the door for 5 seconds before he remembered to exit the room. He attracted a strong wind and blew it hard, then rushed in again. Why are you still here? The people from the parliament are going back tomorrow. Come back with me quickly and clean up. Hey, you have this weird smell, you need to wash it off. Mage Elliot. Gretel turned his head happily. Elliot frowned and endured it again, and finally rushed to his side and stretched out his hand. What are you fussing about? Hey, what is this? A strange-looking thing was placed in front of Greet. A heavy and solid base, an arc-shaped bracket, and a long cylinder fixed on it. There is a shelf supported under the cylinder. Under the shelf, a silver rod enchanted with eternal flame is emitting light evenly and steadily. And Gretel himself, with a face full of joy, waved to him. Come and see. The culprit of this plague, I finally found it. Found it, Elliot was moved. The Magic Council has had at least dozens of theories about the origin of the plague for thousands of years, but none of them can convince the public. Now, this first-level little mage actually said that he found it. Even if it cannot be completely confirmed, as long as the process can be justified, you can publish a good paper. Some of the top journals of the Magic Council will definitely be willing to accept them. Master Elliot bent down and followed Greet's hand. On the shelf under the cylinder, there is a small piece of glass fixed, no, not one piece, but 2 pieces. There seems to be something between the 2 pieces of glass. This is it. Elliot bent down and looked carefully. A drop of transparent liquid dropped on the glass. It was clear and faintly fragrant, as if it were some kind of oil. Olive oil? Or? No, it's from here. Greet pulled him, moved his seat, and pointed to the top of the cylinder. Elliot bent down and came forward. After just one glance, his whole body was shaken violently. Huh! In the cylinder, a world that had never been seen before was unveiled to the young mage. What is this? What are these short, pole-like things? Elliot kept his eyes wide open and leaned down, his eyeballs almost pressing on the top of the cylinder. Soon, he straightened up like crazy, then bent sideways, and almost fell on the shelf under the cylinder. It was still the small glass piece, the liquid droplets on the glass piece were motionless, and inside the glass piece, it was still like it looks like it's holding something. What is this? Is this, the thing inside the glass piece? he was so surprised that he couldn't speak fluently. Why is it so big? Why, the cylinder, can be seen, what about the other things? Stuff, other stuff. That is a microscope. Greed silently shed tears of sympathy for himself. This thing seems to be extremely simple in later generations. It is nothing more than an eyepiece, an objective lens, a shelf, a light source and so on. On Dobeo, there is a 238 optical microscope for students, with a magnification of up to 10,000 times and 30 specimens included. Trying to have a fight here is exhausting him to death. I discussed it with the jeweler all night last night, changing the lenses again and again, and adjusting the focal length again and again. Every step, every detail has to be personally participated by him. That's why he's not participating in the treatment today. Whether you are a priest or a mage, one of the prerequisites for releasing healing techniques and spells is to ensure 8 hours of sleep the night before. After staying up all night, he couldn't release anything today. Well, from this point of view, being a pastor has advantages over being a doctor. At least you don't have to work a long night shift and continue working hard the next day. Fortunately, the microscope was finally built. It's normal to be able to see it, but it means I failed if I can't see it. Greed turned around, wiped la, and dragged a rattan basket from the long table next to her. Then, with this cylinder, you can magnify things many times. Just attach them and see for yourself. Elliot took them tremblingly, and fixed them on the shelf in turn, one after another. Through the cylinder, he saw long, interconnected lattice work on the onion skin, with small black dots in the lattice. In a piece of cork, there is a grid arranged like a honeycomb. A drop of blood fell on the glass, and he saw countless small dots, crowded together. A piece of sulfur. I understand. Ha 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 ha. I understand. That's it? That's it? Elliot burst out laughing. He dug out the piece of sulfur from the shelf and rushed out like a madman. He rushed to the balcony, murmured a curse, and pointed his right hand forward. A spark as big as a pea flew out from the fingertips. Forward, forward. Suddenly exploded. There was a loud bang. The outer wall of the church was shaken by the shock, and Elder Irwin and the bald bishop were all shocked out. Who cast the fireball spell? Is there anyone attacking? A pair of eyes looked at the fireball in the night sky, and then followed the vague elemental fluctuations to look at where the fireball came from. On the balcony, Elliot danced and laughed maniacally. I understand. I have a breakthrough. Little Greet, thank you, ha 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 ha. It turns out that the Leeuwenhoek telescope is just a weak thing. I thought hard and decided not to use it. But at that time, it was really amazing to be able to grind out a 300x magnifying glass. 300 times more powerful than a single lens. It's not 300 times the eyepiece times the objective. Leeuwenhoek was really a craftsman. Please add it to your collection, please recommend it, please review it. The collection has increased a lot this afternoon. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 103. Oh. Such a big reaction? Greet crossed his arms and looked sideways at Master Elliot from a distance. Although you know that you are about to reach the point of upgrading, but with such a vigorous breakthrough, are you afraid that the advertising effect of the microscope will not be enough? By the way, this microscope is reported to the Magic Council as an alchemy equipment. I don't know how much bonus I can get. Little Greet, what have you done again? The shouting outside interrupted Gretel's thoughts. The bald bishop raised his head and shouted, and Gretel rushed to the balcony and shouted back. Master Bishop. Teacher. I have found it. I have found the culprit of this plague. Come and see. Come and see. I'm coming." The bald bishop ran a few steps quickly and jumped high into the air. As soon as he stretched out his hand, he had already grabbed the sculpture on the wall and turned over. Seeing him like this, Elder Irwin smiled bitterly and shook his head, calling everyone to go up the stairs. They walked around in a circle, but before they entered the room, they heard the bald bishop shouting from a distance. "Hey, you can really see clearly. This is also possible. This is also possible. But little Gretel, why do you say that these short little things are the culprits of this plague?" "I found these things in the patient's feces." Greet's voice was unhurried. "It was found in contaminated fountains, in the feces of patients, and in the feces of sick rabbits. On the contrary, it was not found in the feces of healthy rabbits." "Real?" "Indeed it is." Dozens of priests packed the room. Greet simply moved 2 steps away to make way for the microscope. "You can watch it for yourself. After watching it, I will teach you how to make something that everyone can see. Line up, don't crowd, come one by one." The bald bishop reluctantly stepped aside. Elder Irwin adjusted his expression and closed his eyes. "Be serious," he thought, "don't be as surprised as that guy." "Ah!" He let out an exclamation that was slightly lower in volume, but definitely not bad in intensity. Sticking to the microscope and refusing to leave no matter what. Cough, cough. The bald bishop pretended to cough loudly from the side. Elder Irwin looked at it greedily for half a minute, then reluctantly moved his eyes away. Greed had been waiting by the side, and when he saw him getting out of the way, he immediately came up to meet him. "Teacher, let me teach you how to cultivate and dye it so that everyone can see this kind of thing." "Time is pressing," Elder Irwin interrupted him with an unquestionable wave of his hand. "Do it yourself. Prove to me that this little thing caused this plague." "This? What do I mean? What if my proof method is flawed or my operation is wrong?" Gretel shook his sweat silently. However, the elder's stern gaze came over him, and he could only answer loudly with his chest raised. "Yes, teacher." Elder Irwin gave an order, and the priests of the Order of the God of Nature retreated collectively and stood in a row opposite Gretel. Each person has a set of equipment in front of him and follows Greet with a command and an action. Hand washing. Some people were looking for water, some were using water-making skills, and some were using cleaning skills. Mage Elliot was extremely bored, and threw out a few magic tricks to clean the hands of the 2 priests closest to him, but was gouged out by Gretel. A few glances. Cut a piece of aspic and put it on a plate. Don't use the wind blade. Don't use the wind curler. There will be dirt in the air. Swishing, 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 a piece of the purifying diet spell was thrown onto the aspic on the plate. Gretel. Remember to open a topic later and conduct a comparative experiment on bacterial culture using drinking water that has been discarded in the purification diet and drinking water that has not been discarded. He silently added a task to himself and continued to issue orders. Take what you have in your hands. Forget it, there is no need to count on the inoculation loop, just keep it as simple as possible. Fortunately, I prepared many copies. The iron wire in your hands, the end with the ring, first burn it clean with fire. No one went looking for alcohol lamps or candles. A group of priests all stretched their hands forward, and a flame rose into the void. Gretel was amazed. It's really convenient for spellcasters to do experiments. Everything can be done by hand, but, your treatment pressure is not high today? How many spell slots are left? Dip another sample. What is a sample? The water samples, feces, and rabbit droppings in front of you are all samples. Remember to dip the part with pus and blood in the feces, and use the looped end to draw lines on the aspic. How? Look at my movements. A, B, C, D, 4 areas, standard flat plate marking method. Greet was secretly grateful for the time travel benefits that allowed her to clearly remember every book she had read and every experiment she had done in her previous life. It is said that he did the colony culture experiment when he was a junior in college, nearly 20 years ago. Later, he became a clinician, and the laboratory work was not under his control. Have you finished marking it? Okay, close the lid. Come back and see again at this time tomorrow. Want tomorrow? Elder Irwin interrupted suddenly. Gretel turned around and made a deliberately sad face. Teacher, bacteria, oh, it's a little thing like this. It takes time to grow enough for everyone to see. Elder Irwin said oh. Gretel thought everything was fine, so he packed up and was about to go to the side to look at the microscope. Unexpectedly, Elder Irwin lowered his head to pray a few words, then suddenly raised his hand and pressed it on the table, and a green light flashed. Okay. See if this works dash. Gretel. Teacher, you can also produce targeted microorganisms. He opened the lid and saw a translucent colony of bacteria appearing on the aspic. Gretel was speechless and stayed in place, with only one word echoing in his heart. Penicillin. Penicillin. Gray calmed down and continued to guide everyone in making smears, drying them, and dyeing them. After the production was completed, a long queue formed in front of the microscope, and they went up to check one by one. The hand that is accustomed to holding an oak cane holds the piece of glass, which makes a person tremble. He holds it between his fingers for fear of breaking it, holds it in the palm of his hand for fear of blowing it away. Soon, shouts of surprise spread one after another. Hey! The little blue pole! I can see it from here. I can do it here too. I'm here too. There are so many. I don't have much here, I don't have many here, but there are some. I don't have one here, there really isn't one of them exclaimed. The person next to me came over to take a look and laughed and scolded, of course you don't have it here. You have rabbit blood. It's weird to have it. Elder Irwin stood on the edge and looked at them one by one. Blood, feces, water. In addition to blood, healthy rabbit feces and boiling water, small rods dyed blue can be seen in everything else. He finally breathed out. So, are these little things really the cause of this plague? Gretel pretended to be firm and nodded. In fact, it can't be confirmed yet, as he hasn't done the secondary infection experiment yet, but Shigella dysentery looks familiar to him. The elder lowered his head and thought. Suddenly, he raised his eyes and looked straight at Gretel. So, as long as we kill these little things, the disease can be cured. Yes, antibiotics are the most reliable for symptomatic treatment. Anyway, the bacteria in this world are not resistant. Okay, I'll try it. The elder suddenly strode out. Greet was stunned for a moment, then ran to keep up. However, the elder's robes were flying and he was walking faster and faster. He was still left behind even though he was running. It wasn't until he rushed into the hall that he saw a rain of light falling in front of him. Okay. I'm okay. Thank the gods of nature. As the patient shouted in surprise, Irwin held the oak staff tightly in his robe, and the veins on his arms swelled. The cost of healing spells has been reduced by 70%. Little Greet, your method really works. Greet froze on the spot, slowly opening his mouth, not knowing what to say. Teacher, in addition to directional growth of microorganisms, you can also work part-time as living antibiotics. Thanks to @book friend 2019071709143613 for the reward of 100 starting coins. I'm about to make a recommendation, I hope I can do it again before then. Please collect, recommend, and review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 104. Since the advent of antibiotics, they have swept through everything and advanced human medical capabilities by a big step. Elder Irwin's living antibiotic therapy also played a decisive role in the treatment of this plague. How effective is a 70% reduction in treatment costs? The Order of the God of Nature, with its previous healing power, could probably cure 30 to 35 people a day. The War God Temple is similar. Together, the two families can heal about 60 or 70 people. On the first day of large-scale patient admission, 528 patients were admitted to the Glory Cathedral. The next day, the city guards led people to search the entire city and arrested 317 more people. Among the family members of the patients in the cathedral, more than 200 people were detected to be ill and were directly dragged to the treatment area. The number of these patients has exceeded the current treatment capacity by nearly 10 times. Greet had to divide the patients into severe patients and mild patients according to whether they could get up, and place them in separate areas. Then, he persuaded the two leaders of the cult to issue a strict order that the treatment could only be used on seriously ill patients, and it could only be maintained, not cured. As for patients with mild symptoms, they need to rest in bed, be given sugar and salt water, and only be allowed to eat liquid food. This is the end of their care. There is no extra healing power to share with them. Such a two-pronged approach was able to barely maintain the situation from collapse. Although none of the patients admitted have recovered so far, most patients with acute bacillary dysentery recover within 1 to 2 weeks, at least no one has died. The day after the living antibiotic treatment method appeared, that is, the day after the priests learned the improved version of magic, and after 8 hours of sleep, the magic was restored. The light of the treatment swept across the entire critical area. 12 beds healed. 25 beds healed. 39 beds healed. 57 beds healed. Shouts came and went. Proud, joyful, excited. 1, 2, 20, 50. In the end, all the patients in the critical area got out of bed and flocked to their family members in the mild area or isolation area. Little Ava, Mom is okay. John, I'm fine. I'm fine. Mom. My stomach doesn't hurt anymore. Mom. Mom, why are you crying? Gretel stood at the door of the intensive care area, looking at the patients pouring out one after another, smiling sincerely. Everywhere you look, mothers are hugging their children, wives are hugging their husbands, and old people are hugging young children. Every face is filled with joy. Even the patients in the mild disease area who have not been treated by treatment still have the light of hope shining on their faces. Those who were seriously ill have been cured, and now it's their turn. Little Greet, it's all thanks to you this time. A hand patted his shoulder heavily. Before Greet could react, he was knocked down by the slap and became shorter on the spot. He reflexively exclaimed, "Your Majesty Bishop." Ha 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 ha, the bald bishop pulled him up smoothly. Little Gretel, why are you still as weak as a chicken? Look at your teacher, you are still able to fight with me at such an old age. I'm a mage. A mage, Gretel retorted loudly. The bald bishop pushed him forward. The next moment, the priests swarmed up, regardless of gender, age, the Church of God or the Temple of God of War. Throw upward. We did it. We did it. We won. Little Gretel, you are great. They couldn't help but cheer. The healers standing here, the younger ones are fine, the older ones, even if they have not experienced it, have heard about the coming of the plague. The nobles can escape, the mages can close the door and ignore it, but they, the healers, have only one choice: to go up for their faith and compassion for the believers. I originally thought that I would try my best and exhaust myself again and again. I originally thought it would take half a month, or even longer. I originally thought that they would send away 10, 100, or even more dead patients. Who would have thought that surviving the first day would survive the second day? An autopsy, an experiment, the details of the release of the healing technique changed again and again, and on the third day they saw the light. Gretel also wanted to be excited with them. However, at this moment, he was thrown up high and saw the floor approaching and moving away again and again. In the midst of panic and dizziness, he couldn't help but scream. Put me down. Put me down. Help. Teacher, help me dash. Elder Erwin admired the disciples' embarrassment for a while, then took Gretel down and dispersed the crowd. Seeing the priests disperse in twos and threes to treat those with mild symptoms, the elder smiled and sighed with emotion. Little Gretel, it turns out that you admitted to me that you were not the enlightened person of the God of nature, and I believed it. But now, I don't believe it anymore. If not for divine revelation, where could this unheard of knowledge and complete system of techniques come from? Gretel was silent. He recalled those books that were taller than a human being, those surgical instruments that shone with cold light, and those dazzling array of medicines. After a moment, he shook his head firmly. No, they are not gods. They are seekers who risk their lives and steal corpses in the dark night to study the structure of the human body. They are researchers who have passed on the legacy and climbed up on the shoulders of their predecessors. They are kind and strict teachers who spare no effort in teaching through words and deeds. Only not God. In other words, calling them gods would be a real blasphemy against them. Elder Erwin suddenly laughed. He smiled and shook his head. At this moment, you look like a mage. You have no respect for the gods. You always feel that you can do the same thing as them by relying on human strength. Of course. We always have. Gretel answered silently in his heart. When the sky is cracked, we mend it, when floods come, we control the water, when diseases are prevalent, we taste the herbs and treat them ourselves. Don't beg, don't pray, rely on your own efforts, unite as one. If all mages in this world are like this, then I am indeed a born mage. Gretel turned his eyes. Looking at the priests with cheerful smiles and the mild patients with bright and hopeful faces, it was like seeing the patients in the makeshift hospital who got up from their beds and started to do Tai Chi with the doctors. He smiled softly and turned around. Teacher, I'm going in first. There are still a lot of things to do. What are you up to? As I said before, we need to find the source of this plague. Only by finding the source of infection and interrupting the chain of transmission can we completely stop this plague. Gretel answered as he walked forward. The pace is getting faster and faster, and the voice shouting orders is getting louder and more determined. Go and get water. Take a portion from every water source in the city, whether it's rivers, ditches or wells, and remember the location to deliver it. Wash all the plates and dishes. Wash the glass too. Put it in the steamer and steam it. Make another pot of aspic. Find more rabbits. At least 20. Run. Quick. Thanks to @BlackChange for tipping 300 starting coins. Cleared. Cleared. The serious condition has been cleared. Mild symptoms are coming soon. Little Gretel is awesome. Why don't you all celebrate him? Please collect, recommend, and review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 105. The news that the number of seriously ill patients had been eliminated spread throughout the city in waves, along with the city guards rushing in and out and the men delivering food and firewood. Are you all cured? The cup in Baron Vaughn's hand crashed and shattered. The valet who came to report the news hurriedly said. No, it's just that those who couldn't get out of bed were cured. Those with mild symptoms were not cured so quickly. How many people are seriously ill? This. Go and find out. The footman darted away. Baron Vaughn glanced at the fragments on the ground with regret and murmured. So fast, old Guy Horner doesn't have this ability. If this is true, I have to go to the temple of the god of war and donate more money. So fast. Viscount Joan, who was far away in the manor outside the city, was not slow to get the news. Yes, yes, I'm tired of staying in this shabby village, here comes someone. Pack your bags and go back to the city. By the way, are you going? I want to go back. Of course I want to go back. Mrs. Dea burst into tears. Master Viscount, please make the decision for me. Roman has been dead for so long, and his body is not allowed to be collected by the temple. Sir, you just take pity on this son and help him one last time. The carriages rolled from the manor outside the city to the temple of the spring goddess in the city. High Priest Horner, who was in charge of the temple, was also frowning and troubled by the news about the Glory Church. The improvement in the healing capabilities of those two companies is not a good thing for the Spring Goddess Temple. To put it mildly, he will bow his head to the bald bishop. To put it more seriously, the influence of the temple and future donations will be reduced. How did they do it? Do you have any more detailed information? Yes, yes, the person who reported the news nodded like a fool. The news we got is that the little guy called the jeweler to tinker with something, and then used that thing to saw. Our people didn't have a chance to get close, and we didn't know what it was, but it seemed that after the elders saw it, they called a group of people together to murmur. Then, today, those who were seriously ill have been cured. Is this so? The high priest pushed up the round glasses on the bridge of his nose. With his hands behind his back, he walked from east to west, then from west to east. After thinking about it, I frowned. I have to go take a look. Someone. No, forget it, call the jeweler first. The jeweler came tremblingly. After pointing fingers and talking for a long time, he still couldn't explain clearly what thing Gretel asked him to build. The only useful information was that you can see very small things with that thing. How small? No. I don't know, little man, I saw him drop a drop of water on the glass, and then he went up to look. Then what can you see? Okay, stop talking, just make it as it is. The jeweler went to work crying. Unfortunately, the microscope cannot be built in the blink of an eye. Greed had previously allocated enough manpower for him, and he personally selected the lenses and adjusted the focal length. It also took him an entire night to complete one. High Priest Horner waited and waited, but instead of waiting for the finished product, he got a piece of news. Great Priest, it's not good. The Natural God Church has sent word that they are asking for our permission to sprinkle lime into the fountain. Let them go. The person who came was trembling and ran away. The high priest threw a cup in anger, summoned the clergy, and continued to pray. After a round of prayer, another message came in. Great Priest. The elders of the Natural God religion asked for a meeting with the bishop of the God of War temple. They said that the fountain is really polluted and cannot be cleaned until it is cleaned. They even came to our door. The high priest was furious. That is the goddess's holy spring, and it is the goddess's blessing to believers and the city of Heartland. Sprinkling lime into the fountain is no different from blaspheming the goddess. Come here, he stood up angrily. The movement was too hasty, and the silver crown on his head swayed and fell straight down. High Priest Horner simply pulled off the silver crown and smashed it hard on the ground. With a pop sound, the silver crown carefully carved with narcissus patterns twisted into a pile. Ring the bells and blow the trumpets. Gather all the clergy and tell them that the time has come to defend the glory of the goddess. In the deep night, the door of the spring goddess temple suddenly opened. 2 columns of guards ran down quickly with torches in hand, and immediately after, the temple knights rushed out with a roar and a murderous intent, their helmets on their heads. Finally, the great priest appeared surrounded by swords and torches, with an angry look on his face. Erwin. You've gone too far. We're just here to cleanse the fountain. A calm voice sounded from the other side, slowly and without any emotion. Just like the thick dark night in front of you, No matter how strong the great priest's anger is, it can only illuminate it for a moment, but cannot tear the entire night apart. All water sources in the city, as long as they are polluted, must be thoroughly purified. Horner, please do not interfere. You are blaspheming the goddess. High Priest Horner took a few steps forward and blocked the fountain. Anger made his voice louder, almost sharp. This is the goddess's holy spring. It was only temporarily contaminated by patients the day before yesterday. We have held a prayer ceremony and it has been completely purified. Erwin, if you throw debris into the holy spring again, you are blaspheming the goddess. I'm afraid you haven't purified it completely. Elder Erwin sighed softly. Horner, how about, let's go in first and I'll show you the evidence. What evidence? There is no evidence. The goddess's holy spring is absolutely impossible to be unclean. The high priest refused to say anything and rushed to interrupt him. Roll. The staff in his hand paused, and the 3 gems on the head of the staff shone brightly at the same time. It was obvious that a divine spell was ready to be unleashed. Horner Elder Erwin sighed softly. The bald bishop also came out and stood side by side with him. At the same time, there was the sound of footsteps in the darkness, and healers and warriors surged out, facing the spring temple, and gathered into a menacing semicircle. What? You still want to use force? High Priest Horner was stunned for a moment, and then shouted angrily. Without proof or evidence, you are forcing yourself to the door of the temple to blaspheme the glory of the goddess? In this case, even if the temple is weak, it will still fight to the death with you. Guards. Exist. With a loud sound, the temple knights behind the high priest unsheathed their swords. Elder Erwin struck his oak staff, the bald bishop raised his right hand high, and the warriors stepped forward simultaneously without saying a word. At the moment when the swords were at war, a clear voice suddenly sounded from behind the elder. I have proof. Greet walked out slowly. Elder Erwin quickly looked back at him and tried to stop him, but it was already too late. What are you doing out here? What are you doing out here? You have repeatedly insisted that the water in the temple fountain also needs to be purified. Well, you have also provided evidence. The teacher will stand up for you. What do you do by yourself? You are just a little level 1 priest, it will do you no good to offend the great priest. Under the firelight, Greet's expression was calm, and only the black eyes staring at the great priest were dancing with flame-like brilliance. He doesn't necessarily want to be in the limelight. However, Elder Erwin only half understands the relationship between water sample testing, bacterial reproduction, and plague. If the teacher comes forward to argue with others, he will definitely not be able to explain clearly. In order to eliminate the source of infection as soon as possible, he had to come forward in this matter. If you are resented by the great priest, then bear the grudge. He held a small glass bottle high. We tested water samples from all over the city. This fountain, as well as other water bodies connected to the fountain's water source, all detected the source of the disease. Even the bottle mouth from which the water comes out is no exception. We have reason to suspect that the fountain is releasing water. It has been contaminated before. Gret Nordmark. High Priest Horner stared at him, grinding out the boy's name syllable by syllable through his teeth. After wearing a new silver crown, a strand of gray hair that was not tied up stood up almost straight. The water source of the fountain is the holy spring given by the goddess in the deepest part of the temple. It was prayed and blessed before it came out. How could there be a problem? I have evidence, Greet repeated calmly. Your Majesty the High Priest, if you want evidence, I can show it to you. But the matter is urgent, and the plague is still spreading throughout the city. For the health of the people in the city, please you first let us purify the spring water. Oh! Is there any evidence? A voice interrupted suddenly. At the same time, a long shout sounded outside the circle of people facing each other with swords. Your Excellency, the city lord has arrived. Thanks to @book friend 201906182229033346 for the reward of 500 starting coins. Thanks to @Yakunhan and @Urongpoet for the 100 starting coins. I hope Mr. UN is safe. Dog media will kill the whole family. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 106. Oh, it's so lively. City Lord Qiaoan walked in unsteadily. The people on both sides were at war with each other and looked at each other angrily, but he seemed to be unaware of it and looked around with a smile all the way. If he dyes his beard white and lengthens it 3 times, he can be cosplayed as Santa Claus. Lord City Lord. Your Majesty the Viscount. Everyone present gave mixed greetings. Viscount Joan waved this way, nodded his head that way, and walked all the way to the center of the crowd. He stood still, stroking his beard and looking at Greed. I remember you. You are the disciple of Elder Irwin, that person from last Midsummer Festival, right? Greed Nordmark, salute your excellency. Greed bowed his head and saluted. Viscount Joan waved his hand scribbledly. Well, you said there is evidence. Where is it? That bottle? Show me. Seeing it requires tools, Gretel looked around. Lord City Lord, if you allow me, I would like to find a brightly lit room to show you the evidence. Then what are you waiting for? Come in quickly. Viscount Qiaoan walked towards the spring temple. After taking 2 steps, he turned back in surprise. What are you doing? Gretel rolled up the hem of her robe and was lying on the edge of the fountain, stretching her arms to scoop up the water in the fountain. The evidence is in the water of the fountain, Lord Viscount. Gretel went into battle in person, just to attract the attention of the city lord. After achieving his goal, he immediately stopped and stood up. Of course, for the sake of justice, it would be best if you send guards to get water. Or, he curled his lips and suppressed a smile. You can also get water from the priests of the Spring Water Temple. The bald bishop burst out laughing. Elder Irwin did not laugh out loud for the sake of his apprentice, and his white beard also twitched under the firelight. High Priest Horner's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He snorted and had to say to the lord of the city. Please, sir, send guards to get water. Remember to wipe the mouth of the spray bottle as well. Gretel walked in among the crowd, and while racing against time, he turned around and shouted. A large group of people entered the temple. Greed set up a microscope, and Viscount Joan stepped up to take a look, and his eyes lit up. Interesting, really interesting. He walked around the microscope and exclaimed, sometimes putting his fingers over it, sometimes tugging on a sleeve, sometimes pulling out a hair and putting it up to look at. After struggling for a full quarter of an hour, he remembered the guard standing beside him and waved. Just use this thing to see things in the water? Bring it here. It's not. Gretel sweated. Boss, bacterial culture, fixation, staining, nothing has been done. What can be seen through microscopic examination alone? Fortunately, Viscount Joan, who got a new toy, was very patient and let him play with it. Gretel gave an order, and the priests from the Natural Gods Church and the Temple of the God of War came in 2 rows with a command and an action. Coupled with Elder Irwin's bacterial growth stimulating technique, it didn't take long for the dyed bacterial samples to be delivered piece by piece to the city lord. High Priest Horner walked around anxiously, but he couldn't help but lift the table and couldn't find any reason to stop him. Viscount Joan took matters into his own hands and fixed the glass pieces on the stage. He closed his eyes and looked at them one by one. There's this one too. There's this one too. This one doesn't have, this one is made with cold boiled water. This is the one that has been wiped on the mouth of the fountain bottle. As he watched, Viscount Jones' face slowly darkened, and he turned to High Priest Horner. "Come and see for yourself." High Priest Horner reluctantly came over. Greet took a few steps back and watched him finish observing one piece of glass and then another piece of glass. His brows furrowed tighter and tighter, and his hand movements became faster and faster. Beside him, Elder Irwin pulled him quietly and said with worry, "Little Greet, what if he says that we did all these things and that we harmed him? Then ask him to do it himself." Gretel raised the corner of his mouth. "Teacher, you are so considerate. I was in need of someone to compliment me, so here you are." He collected water samples by himself, cultured them by himself, made smears and dyed them by himself. "Don't worry, teacher, I guarantee that as long as the steps are correct, the products will be exactly the same." That magic. You don't need to use magic, just leave the aspic for 24 hours and it will be the same. As for bacteria, if they exist, and if they don't exist, they don't exist. If you can see it, others can also see it, and you can't deny it. This is the principle of repeatability of scientific experiments. "Are you going to bite me?" Gretel became more confident every sentence. High Priest Horner's face turned darker and darker, and he finally threw down the glass piece in his hand and roared. "So what if you have this thing? It's a little bigger, you don't need this dash." "Microscope." Greed prompted the words right next to him. Elder Irwin almost laughed, "You might as well not mention it." Sure enough, High Priest Horner glared at Gretel fiercely. After staring, he remembered and continued roaring. "So what if you find something that you can't see without a microscope in a fountain? There are too many small things in this drop of water. Why do you say it caused the plague? Not something else? Why do you think it caused the plague? What, it's not like the poor themselves are sick." There was a sudden silence in the temple. Lord Joan was stunned for a moment. The bald bishop scratched his head. Elder Irwin instinctively wanted to answer. He opened and closed his mouth and looked at Gretel. "Yes, why do you say that this gadget can make people sick and spread the plague?" Gretel suddenly smiled. With a chuckle, he confidently took a step forward and held his head high. "Of course I have a way to prove it." At his request, Viscount Jones' guards turned around and went out, carrying 10 rabbits. 8 were healthy and 2 had diarrhea. High Priest Horner, Bald Bishop, Elder Irwin, and the 3 leaders of the cult took turns to treat the healthy rabbits with healing techniques over and over again until they were sure that there were no problems. Under Gretel's guidance, take it step by step and start experimenting. Take the feces of healthy rabbits and sick rabbits, place them on the aspic respectively, and Elder Irwin throws them on with a growth spell. After the magic was done, bacterial culture was performed, and as expected, those short, rod-like gadgets were found in the feces of the sick rabbit. Healthy rabbits don't have gadgets like this, right? Greet smiled leisurely. 8 petri dishes were lined up, and no rod-shaped gadgets were found in the feces of the 8 healthy rabbits. Looking at his dazzling smile, High Priest Horner endured it again and again before throwing rabbit shit in his face. "No. So what?" "Not very good." Greet shrugged and continued to the next step. Pick up some bacteria from the gray-white round colonies in the petri dish of the sick rabbit, and smear it on a newly delivered clean petri dish that has never been used before. "Teacher, I have to trouble you again. Throw the second growth spell up." The translucent aspic was quickly covered with round bacterial colonies. Cultivate the bacterial flora, verify the purity of the bacterial colony, then mix the bacteria with cold boiled water and feed them to healthy rabbits, and wait patiently for a few hours until they start to get sick. As expected, the same rod-shaped microorganisms were cultured in the feces of the newly sick rabbits. After everyone took turns to verify it, Gretel faced High Priest Horner, smiled and spread his hands. "It can be found in sick rabbits, it can't be found in healthy rabbits." Things obtained from sick rabbits can survive, reproduce, and multiply, and are injected into healthy rabbits, causing exactly the same disease. From the second batch of sick rabbits, the same thing was isolated again. Do you need any other evidence? The famous Cock's law can be refuted on the spot, unless the goddess of spring water descends to earth immediately. Impossible. The great priest's face turned pale. He suddenly turned around and ran to the main hall, knelt down in front of the statue, and hugged the goddess's skirt with both hands. It's really the holy spring, it's really the holy spring that caused the plague, goddess. Are you going to punish us? Thanks to @Chu999999 for the reward of 300 starting coins. What day is today? Mr. Yuan is gone, Mr. Wu Mengchao is also gone, they are all pillars of the country. Feeling uncomfortable, huddled up in a ball. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Jiolan 2020. Chapter 107. High Priest Horner fell to his knees and cried bitterly. The grey head hit the statue, and soon the white skirt of the spring goddess was splashed with blood. Soon, with a thud, he fell to his knees behind him. The priests of the fountain goddess knelt on the ground and murmured prayers. The holy spring in the temple is a symbol of the goddess's blessings to believers, as well as the goddess's glory and authority. Now, the plague actually flows out of this holy spring. Doesn't that mean the goddess is angry and sends down divine punishment? Faced with this tragic situation, the visiting guests couldn't help but slow down their steps. The bald bishop looked pitiful, and Elder Irwin looked away silently, feeling sad in his heart. They are all people who serve the gods. Everyone can feel the same when they see High Priest Horner like this. The bald bishop imagined praying to the god of war for protection before going into battle, but then found that all the weapons were inexplicably decayed. Elder Irwin imagined praying to the god of nature for fertility and harvest, and then inexplicably, the entire forest withered and all the trees died. The two of them shuddered at the same time, looked at each other silently, and turned their heads. If they encounter this kind of situation, deprivation of the priesthood is a light matter. Even if they die, it may not be enough to atone for their sins, right? There was a loud cry in the main hall. At the entrance of the palace, an inappropriate voice came out cautiously. Teacher. Greet waited and waited, feeling that he had given them enough time for silence, but no one paid attention to him. I have no choice but to find some sense of existence for myself. We'll talk about it later, Elder Alvin whispered to stop the disciple. Unexpectedly, not only did Greet not shut up, but he raised his voice. Teacher, I think the polluted spring water may not be a divine punishment from the spring water goddess. Gretel never felt that it was divine punishment. The reason why he couldn't bear to speak out until now was because he was crying and shouting just now and the atmosphere was not right. The other reason was that he was stunned by the great priest's imagination. What the hell is divine punishment? The goddess of spring water has made the wrong mistake. She wants to grab a lot of dysentery bacteria and throw them into her own spring water. Even if she is willing to catch the god of this world, you told me that she can culture bacteria. Let her operate one for me first. What? Several priests kneeling behind turned their heads at the same time. One of them even shouted. It's not divine punishment? You said it's not divine punishment. Oh, isn't this priest Donald? Acquaintance. Gretel was delighted. He took a step forward and became more confident. Isn't that what I said at the beginning? It's polluted. It's polluted. Hurry up, take me where your fountain leads to, where it is most likely to pollute the water source. Complete the test and bacterial culture as soon as possible to determine the source of the pollution and purify it as quickly as possible, so everyone can worry less. Otherwise, what is the purpose of his stubborn fight with the temple? Is he trying to demolish the house? The spring water goddess didn't offend him to this extent. Water pollution. Priest Donald stood there dumbfounded and muttered again. He suddenly got excited, rushed out of the crowd, and ran towards Gretel. I know, it's probably right there. Follow me. As the two of them were asking and answering questions, people were already reacting one after another. Priest Donald had only reached halfway when two more trainee knights came out of the crowd, running to lead the way. This is it. Follow me. One after another people followed. Greed followed them deeper and deeper, becoming more and more heavily guarded as they went, seemingly entering the core area of the temple. After turning another corner, the woman's sharp cry suddenly penetrated Gretel's eardrums. Why don't you let me see my son? You won't let me collect the body. My son. Roman. Roman. Gretel paused. Priest Donald looked embarrassed, but still insisted on pulling him forward. After taking a few steps closer, a roar suddenly sounded from behind them. Who let her in? Drag her down. High Priest Horner was panting and rushed over regardless of the blood dripping from his head. He stood there, looking at Greed with anger and hope in his eyes. Any clergyman who thought he was being punished by God and had someone tell him probably not had to hold on tight. He took a few breaths and pointed forward. In the temple, the place connected to the water source. This is where something happened recently. Everyone rushed in. Priest Donald stepped in and immediately paused. Even though he had seen it dozens of times, the scene in front of him was still shocking to him. The black reverse pentagram is deeply imprinted on the stone slab. After so many days of prayer and washing, the imprint is still obvious. Not to mention, there is a human figure deeply dented in the center of the five-pointed star. Thinking that that person was once a living person who had dealt with him and protected him during his travels, Priest Donald's Adam's apple began to roll up and down again. He felt like vomiting again. Gretel felt nothing about it. The reverse pentagram, the human figure in the middle, the games I played and the animations I watched in my previous life were much more disgusting than this. He squatted down, curiously looked at the black marks on the ground, and waved his hand. Take samples. On the ground, in the walls, in the crevices of the rocks, where does this water seep from? Give me samples from all the seeping pipes. Half an hour later, a large group of priests surrounded Greet and watched him conduct 3 sets of bacterial culture experiments, smears, and staining using the river water outside, fountain water, black water in the secret room, and black spots scraped from the wall of the secret room. Microscopic examination. The result is very clear. Gretel raised his head from the microscope. Opposite him, City Lord Joan, Bald Bishop, Elder Irwin, and High Priest Horner lined up. Gretel brushed the petri dish in front of him with his fingertips and said with determination, "The bacterial content in the black water is at least 10 times higher than that in the fountain outside. The black spots scraped from the wall have a bacterial content that is more than 10 times higher than that in the black water. Since there is no other water source leading to the secret room." "That bastard Roman," the high priest blurted out viciously. He stared at Mrs. Dea, who was being held aside with disheveled hair. Her eyes were red, and he just wanted to go up and bite her. He refused to sincerely repent, and instead committed suicide in a secret room using evil rituals. He must have attracted the devil. The corpse turned into black water, polluting the water source, and causing the plague. Lord City Lord. The temple has been working hard to purify the water these days. You also saw how deep the mark was on the stone before we prayed and purified. Just say something will happen." Gretel complained silently. "I was worried when that knight died, but now I'm fine. I'm worried about whatever I'm afraid of. You say you people are all good at prayer, purification, and magical arts, so why don't you just throw more lime into the water source? Thanks to @book friend 20190717091436136136, @Sherry Gray for the 100 starting coins reward. Today is the last half of the day to test the waters. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it, please review it. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 108. Enough. Viscount Jiaoan watched this moment with cold eyes and finally spoke up. He ignored Mrs. Dea, who was crying in pain, looked around, and concluded loudly. This plague was caused by the Roman knights' madness and blasphemy, which attracted the power of evil. The temple worked hard to purify and eliminated most of the evil, but a small part still leaked out and caused the plague. Is there any objection? Praise you for your justice, High Priest Horner, the priests of the Fountain Goddess, and Baron von and others who heard that the Viscount had returned to the city and hurried over all responded in unison. The temple of the Goddess of Spring neglected its duty of care and failed to completely purify the evil. The cost of treating the plague and appeasing the people are all the temple's responsibility. High Priest Horner agreed with a grimace. No matter what, it was better than the temple being punished by the gods. Viscount Joan pondered for a moment, looked at the resentful High Priest Horner, and emphasized, the Roman knights blasphemed the gods, betrayed the virtues of knights, and committed a major crime. Deprived of knight status and confiscated private property. No one raised any objection at the scene. Mrs. Dea, the only one who screamed and cried bitterly, was deprived of the ability to speak by a magical spell from High Priest Horner, and was dragged out by the temple guards. Viscount Joan turned his head and no longer looked at this old lover who was old and lustful. He turned to Elder Irwin and the bald bishop, and said pleasantly, "Thanks to you too this time. The people are still suffering from the plague, so it is not the time to celebrate. When the plague is over, I will make a special trip to hold a banquet to thank you for your hard work." City Lord Jiaoan means what he says. 7 days later, the patients in the Glory Cathedral were completely cleared, and there were only a few patients occasionally appearing in the city. He held a banquet and entertained all the prominent figures in the city. Gretel was also dragged over. He reluctantly sat at the banquet, looked around, and almost laughed out loud. The City Lord's invitation list, in addition to the group of nobles who ran out together earlier, was actually the same people he asked the teacher to gather on the day the epidemic was discovered. Every one of them was invited. Food merchants, dye merchants, building guild leaders, jewelers. These people whose businesses are neither small nor big, and who are usually not qualified to be invited by the city lord's mansion, are now sitting at the banquet, their faces blank, and even a little trembling. "Don't be afraid, I won't take advantage of you." Gretel really wanted to say this to them. However, he was sitting relatively far forward, far away from the merchants and craftsmen, and could only blink at them. What a sin, the jeweler's eyes are all red. I seem to have heard that the spring water temple locked him inside and asked him to make another microscope. That's a big project. I don't understand magnification, focal length, or even how to make the eyepiece and objective lens on the same axis. I don't know if anyone can make something that works. While he was thinking wildly, Lord Jiaoan had already finished his toast and toasted to the 3 leaders of the cult. Turning around, he actually held the wine glass directly in front of Gretel. "Greet Nordmark," he called Greet's name with a smile, and his tone was so cordial that it was a whole level better than that meeting on Midsummer Day. "I remember you. Your father, Fred Nordmark, was a heroic knight. He died fighting against foreign enemies. I was very sorry. Fortunately, you have grown up safely over the years and have grown into a noble man." Spellcaster. The lord of the city talked endlessly, and Greet also put on a humble smile, very supportive. "Hey, it's different after upgrading. When I was still an apprentice, you didn't think of my father or anything like that. By the way, last time you said you wanted to clean up the sludge and excrement in the city? What you said then was that this kind of mess would cause a plague." The City Lord suddenly changed the subject. Gretel suddenly came back to his senses and his eyes lit up. "Yes. This is a good suggestion. I'm sure. Nolan, I'll leave this matter to you. Captain Nolan said loudly. Viscount Joan touched his chin and looked at Gretel up and down. The more he looked at it, the more satisfied he became. This guy has been upgraded too fast. He was nothing 3 or 4 months ago, and now he is a first-level priest. Well, bring a first-level mage. He tried his best to cough seriously and said seriously. In this plague, you have made great achievements again and saved the lives of hundreds of citizens. Well, what reward do you want this time? Is it time to settle rewards again? Gretel was a little excited. He was happy, but he still maintained his rationality. He knew that he could not open his mouth like a lion and lowered his head in a pretentious manner. Saving lives and healing the wounded is my duty as a healer, and I have nothing to ask for. If my work is approved by you, I hope you can give me a microscope, that thing that can see very small objects, so that I can better good service to you. What kind of reward is that? Viscount Joan laughed. He stretched out his fleshy right hand. This hand was once able to hold a knight's sword and fight on the battlefield, but now it was so fat that he could hardly close his fingers, and patted Gretel on the shoulder. That object was made by you, and it belongs to you. Think again. Huh. Earn a microscope for nothing. Microscope? He asked the jeweler when he came. A magnifying glass costs 100 gold coins, and the eyepiece and objective lens costs 200. Plus various accessories and craftsmanship, it can't be obtained without 300 gold coins. This is still the cost price. Even though he is now an official mage, he still can't get it out even if he empty out his wallet. Earn it? Big profit. Lord Viscount, you are such a good person. Gretel almost cheered. The corners of his mouth kept rising, still maintaining a humble posture, and whispered. If possible, I hope to be qualified to open a treatment center in the city. Like my teacher, I will treat the poor and take care of their health. Open a hospital. Recruiting doctors. Looking for nurses. Spread medical skills, treat patients, and pave the way for your own upgrade. To the lord of the city, this request sounded like it was not self-serving at all, but focused on benefiting others. Viscount Joan was greatly moved and patted Gretel on the shoulder again. Gret Nordmark. You are a spellcaster with noble sentiments. I want people to sing your praises and reward your virtue. Nolan. The captain of the city guard stepped forward again. Viscount Joan rubbed his fingers. Does Roman have several manors in his private property? Take one out, choose a house in the city, and transfer it together to Gret Nordmark's name. I want everyone to know that I, City Lord Chiaoan, will not treat those who have made meritorious deeds and have high moral standards. Wow! There is room for a hospital. Start-up funds are also available. It's enough to cover the daily expenses of a whole manor and maintain the hospital. Next, only medicines, equipment, doctors and nurses are left. Greet, come on. Thanks to at long Judy, at my knife is filled with poison and the reward is 100 starting coins. There are so few book reviews these days, I posted a chapter without even a single review, blah blah blah. Don't you all love me anymore? Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please ask for all kinds of. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 109. The Roman knight's wife returned to her parents' home with her children and dowry. What was confiscated was the Roman knight's private property, and her dowry was not involved. After all, I still have 200 to 300 acres of land under my name, so I can still make a living for my family. Madame Dea also retreated to her estate. Her background was better than that of her daughter-in-law, and her dowry was larger, otherwise she wouldn't have been able to marry a baron in the first place, but later she hooked up with the city lord, Viscount Joan, and the eldest son couldn't accept it, so he cut off all contact with her. Now, with her youngest son dead and her eldest son turning against her, she has nowhere to go but stay in the manor that was her dowry. One piece, no, strictly speaking, 2 pieces of real estate, just hit Greet on the head. Your wealth has skyrocketed, and you are one step closer to your dream. Apart from being happy, Gretel was also a little confused. Is the city lord so generous? Ordinarily, he did save a lot of people. If it hadn't been for him, the plague would have been around for at least half a month, and 100 or 200 people in the city would have died if they were unlucky. However, these alone are worth a house in the city and a village. To put it bluntly, most of those who will die from the plague are poor. As for the city lord, who retreats to the countryside whenever a plague appears and refuses to pay for disaster relief, he may not take those people seriously. Give him a house for this? The logic doesn't make sense. Under such doubts, Greet was still in a daze until he obtained the house deed. Elder Irwin accompanied him to see the house. Seeing his worried look, Elder Irwin laughed aloud after asking, "You think it's because you cured the plague? Don't be stupid. It's just because of the beginning, not because of your promising future. Who is so generous?" He became an apprentice in less than 1 month, and became an official mage and official priest in 2 months. This kind of person is not make friends. Who do you want to make friends with? If Greet had some enlightenment, he felt that there was more to it than just that. After continuing to listen to the elder's explanation, I realized that there was a rule among the nobles: those with abilities must have corresponding property and status. In other words, even if you are a penniless poor boy, once you step onto the threshold of the extraordinary, the local nobles will try their best to absorb you. If there is a shortage of money, give money. If there is a shortage of manpower, give someone a hand. As for status, the status of a formal magician is equivalent to that of a knight, and he is qualified to participate in aristocratic discussions, although he may not necessarily achieve anything, but if he is qualified to sit in, people of the same level will not step on you for no reason. Gretel was thoughtful, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt that this unspoken rule actually made sense. The other world is no better than the previous one. All the power of the extraordinary belongs to oneself. If you don't give him money or status, or if you are short of money and grab a sum, he will become a destabilizing factor in a minute. Who will cry then? Aren't you rich and powerful men? Then they have to pay a lot of money. Gretel blurted out. Elder Irwin couldn't help laughing. Actually, there's not much. Generally speaking, if you don't come from a rich and powerful family, your children won't be able to take this path at all. If a knight achieves military merit, he will naturally be rewarded by the Lord. A magician, learning magic is more expensive, right? What about the priest? Greet retorted subconsciously. Elder Irwin glanced at him slowly. Pastor is pious. You have dedicated yourself to the gods. What more money, status, etc. do you want? Does your heart not restrain you? Aren't you afraid that the magic will fail? Our Lord City Lord is a little lecherous, a little lazy, and a little mediocre. Elder Irwin continued to comment slowly. Gretel Khan. But he's still good at copying the gourd. Besides, he doesn't have to pay for it himself. Didn't this just confiscate a sum of money? That Roman knight has 3 estates under his name. If I give you 1, he still has 2 left. Gretel pursed his lips and decided not to continue complaining to the teacher. Elder Irwin looked at him and suddenly laughed. Besides, do you know how these noble gentlemen usually recruit new blood? It's through marriage. Silly boy, just wait, someone will come to propose marriage soon. No. Gretel screamed. I want to open a hospital. I also want to learn magic. I also want to travel around the country and the mainland. I also want the stars and the sea. I don't want to be tied up now. Greed walked, being laughed at by the teacher, and soon arrived in front of the house allocated by the city lord. Viscount Joan was quite generous with his purchase. In terms of area, this house was 10 times larger than Greed's residence in the city. It was a 2-story brick building. At first glance, it looked similar to the small rural villa that Greed often saw in his previous life. Downstairs is the living room, kitchen, and dining room, with a large bedroom on the left and right sides. There is a large living room upstairs, surrounded by 5 or 6 rooms, including bedrooms, study rooms, studios, and a large balcony. The clinic, treatment room, operating room, pharmacy. This kitchen is too small to be used as a disinfection room. Hey, teacher, this house needs to be renovated. Does this still need to be renovated? Elder Irwin looked at him with strange eyes. Don't you just want to open a treatment center? This house is very nice. Clean it and move some furniture in and you can use it. The teacher's house is not as big as yours, and it doesn't have as many things. It's really useless without decoration, Greed said with a sad face. Teacher, look, the walls have not been painted, the roof has not been painted, and something will fall down at any time. It is impossible to perform surgery like this. Besides, the kitchen is too small, there is no toilet at all, and there is no way to deal with medical waste. There is no place. At least give me a bathroom. And there's running water. Elder Irwin was thoughtful. He didn't understand every word of Gretel's words, and he didn't understand the reason for every word. But several times before, this child has proved that those inexplicable requests are reasonable. Then what do you need? Gretel grimaced. He needs so many things, materials, instruments, and equipment that even with the lowest clinic configuration, he can't finish it on an A4 paper. Put together, the most fundamental requirements are money. Teacher, do you have money? I feel like it will cost a lot of money to do this. Especially the water purification device, water supply and drainage, TISC. By the way, we also need to make a shadowless lamp. The current shadowless lamp solution is to gather a dozen priests and use human flesh to illuminate. It is simply intolerable. The more people there are, the greater the risk of infection in the operating room. Elder Irwin stopped his hand and looked at Gretel with a smile. It wasn't until he looked a little embarrassed that he asked leisurely. Why do you think you'll run out of money? This. Viscount Joan only gave him a manor and a house, but no cash. Do I want to sell the manor? If you are in a hurry to sell, you can't sell it for the price. Gretel struggled to argue. Before he could leave his mouth, a shout sounded outside the door of the stone house. Your Excellency Nordmark. Your Excellency, are you here? I'm here. What's going on? The villain is sending you a gift on the order of Baron von. Congratulations to your Excellency. Sir Levi congratulates Master Nordmark. Lord Fulmer congratulates. Nolan Knight. Knight of Baron. Gifts were pouring in, and in just a blink of an eye, the long table in the living room was piled up. Gretel looked at the table full of gold coins, silks, spices, and various gifts. Her heart was rolling around, and only one word echoed repeatedly. Fan Jin passed the exam. He suddenly looked at Elder Irwin. Lift your chin and smile. Teacher, do you want to send a few priests to station here? I can teach them. Thanks to @book friend 201906182229033346 for the reward of 175 starting coins. Thanks to @Wan Jo Wuliang, it's time to rest, @book friend 201906032330068896 for the 100 starting coins reward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? You see, the protagonist arrives in another world with nothing but money. It has only been a few months and the hospital is about to be opened. Please collect, recommend, and review books. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 110. Chapter 110 I volunteer to devote myself to medicine and abide by medical ethics. Are you willing to teach? Elder Irwin was surprised. He introduced Gretel to the deism, with the intention of letting him teach what he knew to other priests in the order. However, the time we spend together is short, so it is not easy to speak rashly. Furthermore, Greet is not the kind of person who is stingy with his skills. When he encounters an opportunity, he is very generous in teaching him things. On the other hand, Elder Irwin can be sure that there is a huge system behind it, which cannot be explained in just a few words. Therefore, Elder Irwin waited patiently, waited, and finally waited until Gretel took the initiative to speak. Anyone can come to learn. Are there any conditions required? For the sake of caution, Elder Irwin asked one more question. Greet thought for a while. The conditions must be there. First of all, you can work here without wages. When you open a hospital, you don't pay the doctors. I'm so bad. What an evil capitalist. Although each of those priests does not understand modern medicine, they are all experienced doctors in terms of treatment, okay. This is using a practicing doctor as an intern. Salary, Elder Irwin was surprised. You want to get paid for coming to learn something. Whose apprentice needs a salary? Isn't it enough for teachers to provide food and housing? Gretel was speechless. Well, he was wrong. Even if he was a formal priest, anyone who came to learn a craft would be treated as an apprentice. Just like a formal doctor who comes to a higher level hospital for further training. Also, you must obey my guidance and abide by the same oath as me. Health depends on life, does it depend on it? Yes. Elder Irwin was silent. He recited these 8 words silently, chewed them back and forth several times, and nodded heavily. Are there any other conditions? Gone. Just these 2? Yes. What kind of condition is this? Elder Irwin suddenly laughed out loud. Leave it to the teacher. The teacher will find 10 or 8 for you. That won't work. A loud laugh suddenly sounded outside the door. The bald bishop rushed in, his feet rattling and the wooden planks he stepped on shook the ground. He pointed at Gretel and then at Elder Irwin, smiling like a fox catching a weasel. Hey, are you eating alone? Little Gretel, I have never treated you badly since I met you. Your teacher arranged 10 or 8, and I will send 10 or 8 here, otherwise I will tear you apart. Building. Hey, you want to try it? Elder Irwin took a step forward and blocked his face with his cross arm. The bald bishop grabbed his wrist and pushed it out hard. The biceps on his arm bulged. Just try it. The 2 elders were joking around half-heartedly, and Gretel took a few steps back, only smiling bitterly. Despite their noisy mirth, one of the 2 was at level 7 and the other was at level 8, and their warrior levels were at least level 5 and up. With his small stature, it's better not to get into it. 2 tanks are pushing against the cows, so there is no place for a bicycle to stand. Greet took a step back, then another step, silently finding a safe corner to stand. Then, with anger in his dantian, he shouted with all his strength. Teacher! Lord Bishop! I can't even accommodate a few people here. The 2 bosses stopped immediately. The bald bishop looked over immediately. How many can be stuffed at most? Greet looked around and made quick calculations. This 2-story building has a construction area of about 300 square meters, including the upstairs and downstairs. After deducting the stairs and walkways, and then deducting his own bedroom, there should be another alchemy laboratory, etc. The usable area is probably about 200 square meters. It is larger than a clinic, and it is a community health station where surrounding residents can have their blood pressure measured, get water, and receive vaccinations on a daily basis. As for how many people are needed for a health station: 3 doctors, 3 nurses. Gretel muttered as quietly as possible. Seeing the bald bishop's bell-like eyes staring at him, he jumped back reflexively and raised his voice. 5. 5 at most. I'm 3 and you're 2. You 2 and I 3. There are 3 of you, even little Gretel is 4. Little Greet belongs to our family. We should have more, why should we give you one more? The bald bishop immediately quarreled with Elder Erwin again. The 2 of them were at war with each other and refused to give in. The heavy log table shook and trembled, making Greet worried that it would be smashed to pieces. After arguing for a while, the elder rolled his eyes and suddenly smiled. Little Greet, if you accept people here, do you want to accept everyone who is willing to abide by your oath? Of course, Gretel replied without thinking. Elder Erwin slapped him. That's great. I'm going to find that old guy Horner. For this quota, I have to let him get more blood. Hey hey. The tension was gone. The 2 big guys looked at each other, smiling more proudly than the other. They looked like weasels and foxes stealing chickens together. Greet didn't know what the elders and the high priest were talking about in private. All he knew was that the great priest sent a team of people to install a magical array in the hospital. It was said that it could produce 4 gallons of clean water every day, which was about as pure as clean rainwater. The construction team sent by the temple also took care of the renovation of the house. According to the drawings he produced, they planned to build what should be built and paint what should be painted, and also build a toilet in the back. As for the people sent by the temple, Priest Donald, Gretel was very happy. You're actually here? That's great. Of course I'm coming. Priest Donald looked even happier than him. He was beaming with joy, and his chest almost turned over. I've wanted to come here for a long time. I've always wanted to learn your weird treatment methods. I'm very curious. When the high priest asked, I was the first to sign up. Gretel nodded happily. He let go of Priest Donald's hand and looked around. The people who come to work at his place are all acquaintances. Everyone meets his gaze, smiles, and nods gently. The gods came to a man and a woman. Ivan looked excited, as he did when he was eager to ask questions at the first party. Joanna chuckled lightly and winked at Gretel, flames flying on her face. At the temple of the god of war, Gretel directly named Little John to occupy a spot. The other one, in accordance with Gretel's request, wanted a warrior with the highest level possible, so the 4th level priest standing there was tall and round, almost twice the size of Little John. Greet nodded to them one by one. He calmed down and spoke loudly. Before coming, you should have heard and been willing to abide by the same oath as me. But today, before starting to study, I still have to solemnly swear an oath with you. He took a deep breath, lowered his eyebrows, and recalled the past. Then, make a fist with your right hand and raise it to your ear. Opposite, 5 priests imitated his example and raised their right fists in exactly the same way. Health depends on life. Health depends on life, life depends on it. The priests followed unevenly. Gretel looked at them one by one, his voice was steady, his tone was heavy and clear. When I enter the sacred medical school, I solemnly swear. When I enter the sacred medical school, I solemnly swear. You may not understand what this oath means, and you may even have never heard of some of the words. But it doesn't matter. From today on, I will lead by example and teach by words and deeds. I am willing to devote myself to medicine, abide by medical ethics, respect teachers and observe discipline, study hard, work tirelessly, strive for excellence, and develop in an all-round way. I volunteer to devote myself to medicine, abide by medical ethics, respect teachers and observe discipline, study hard, work tirelessly, strive for excellence, and develop in an all-round way. The excitement surged in Greet's chest. He clenched his right fist tightly, dug his fingertips into his palm, and spoke in a high voice. I am determined to do my best to eliminate human suffering, help improve health, safeguard the sanctity and honor of medical skills, save lives and heal the wounded, work tirelessly and persistently, and strive for the development of medicine and health and the physical and mental health of mankind throughout my life. Infected by his emotions, the voices of the priests from 3 sects and 3 different faiths gradually became more serious. With a solemn expression and a sonorous tone. I am determined to do my best to eliminate human suffering, help improve health, safeguard the sanctity and honor of medical skills, save lives and heal the wounded, work tirelessly and persistently, and strive for the development of medicine and health and the physical and mental health of mankind throughout my life. Thank you for the free reward of 1,500 starting coins for the first name change. Please collect, recommend, book reviews, please vote for me.